This is GARIS Essays, that is 2-3 page opinion pieces on topics such as species dominance, the global state, politics, femtotech, religion, society and education. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. This is essay number 17, entitled Answering My Critics by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Abstract. March 1st, 2012 was the planet's first Future Day, an idea conceived by Ben Goertzel. The idea was to celebrate the future. I have no objection to the idea of reflecting on the future, but the idea of celebrating it annoyed me because we cannot be sure whether we should fear the future, so celebrating it seemed naive and premature. So I started trolling, on the Kurzweil AI site on this point. Quite a dialogue sprang up between one of my critics, which I reproduce in this essay. I hope you find it interesting. It dealt with quite a range of topics, ranging from the over-optimistic naivete of the singularitarian Pollyannists to the American muddle class, culture bashing, Glober, etc. It begins with the announcement of Future Day, which ironically I helped edit the text of via Adam Ford, the organizer of the Australian Singularity Summits and the Humanity Plus meetings. I then hit back with my I am so sick of American Singularity Pollyannists, and then it started. 1. The original Future Day announcement. Future Day, a new global holiday, March 1st. This is dated February 29, 2012. Future Day. Why are nearly all holidays focused on celebrating the past or the cyclical processes of nature? Why not celebrate the amazing future we are collectively creating? That's the concept behind a new global holiday, Future Day, March 1st, conceived by AI researcher Dr. Ben Goertzel. Future Day 2012 gatherings are scheduled in more than a dozen cities, as well as in Second Life. Celebrating and honouring the past and the cyclical processes of nature is a valuable thing, says Goertzel. But in these days of rapid technological acceleration, it's our future that needs more attention, not our past. My hope is that Future Day can serve as a tool for helping humanity focus its attention on figuring out what kind of future it wants and striving to bring these visions to reality. And a quote from Ray Kurzweil. The past is over, the present is fleeting, we live in the future. Ray Kurzweil, Future Day. Ray Kurzweil predicts that technological paradigm shifts will become increasingly common, leading to technological change so rapid and profound it represents a rupture in the fabric of human history, says Goertzel. Future Day is designed to center the impossible in the public mind once a year as a temptation too delicious to resist, says Howard Bloom, author of Global Brain. If all matter in the universe is comprised of patterns, let's redesign what doesn't work and form new methods for approaching the future with fluidity, says designer Natasha Vita-Moore, chairwoman of Humanity Plus. Future Day's events so far. Melbourne. Okay, I'll read it up. 5:30 p.m., 1:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 10:30 p.m. Moderated by Singularity Summit AU organizer Adam A. Ford and Australian ABC TV newscaster Josie Taylor, with Skype call-ins by Goertzel and Vita-Moore. Hong Kong, 7 p.m., 6 a.m. EST. Informal event in Hong Kong organized by Goertzel. Terra Sem Island, Second Life, 6 p.m. EST. A public event where authors Howard Bloom and Martine Rothblatt and blogger Julio Prisco will join Goertzel, Vita-Moore and Ford. Fast Forward Radio, 10 p.m. EST. Guest PJ Manny Future Day, what is it? How should we celebrate it? Other events: Sydney, Berkeley, Edmonton, Houston, Sao Paulo, Salt Lake City, Brussels, Paris, Los Angeles, Palo Alto, Washington DC, Lehigh, Utah, and Wrocław, Poland. See futureday.org/events for updates. Starting your own Future Day event, listed here, info@futureday.org. 2. My negative reaction to the idea of celebrating the future. Feb 29th, 2012, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. I am so sick of American singularity Pollyannists. I wrote an essay recently, I am so sick of American singularity Pollyannists, which express my growing disdain for American naivete concerning the rise of the intellect. The link was profhugodegaris.wordpress.com/essays/. Why should the future be celebrated? Perhaps it should be feared. Imagine a time traveller going back to the gay 90s, that is the 1890s in Europe, a time of great optimism with scientific and medical prowess rising, and after a near century of European peace, and trying to educate them on the horrors of the trench warfare that were to come 2 decades later in World War I. The time traveller would not have been believed. My questionnaires that I've been using for the past 6 months show that a substantial proportion of the general public are horrified at the idea of machines/cyborgs becoming the dominant species, and suspect there is a very real probability that there will be a great species dominance, that is, intellect war, killing billions. I'm impatient for China to rise, to democratize, and bring its old world maturity to the dominant issue of our century, should we build intellects. How can I take seriously a new world parvenu culture, that is the US, that so naively thinks that the future will necessarily be all rosy? Old world cultures know better, based on longer experience. White Americans haven't had a major war in their territory for a century and a half, and even then only roughly 500,000 were killed in the US Civil War. At the same time, the Taiping Rebellion in China killed 20 million. America's lack of sophistication and historical sense makes it unsuitable to be the intellectual leader of the planet's dominant political issue of the 21st century. My God, literally half of Americans think the Earth is less than 10,000 years old. So it doesn't surprise me that many of them think the future will be just wonderful. A future day should be to reflect on the future, considering both the possible good and possible bad, and not be celebrated. Should the gay 90s Europeans have celebrated a future World War I? Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS at email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. 3. The critics and my replies. Feb 29, 2012 by Spikosauropod. S-P-I-K-O, Spikosauropod. S-A-U-R-O-P-O-D. To Dr. de GARIS. First of all, PhDs who refer to themselves as doctor are universally reviled. I recommend that you drop the affectation. Just your use of the term singularity Pollyannists is proof enough that you are completely off the mark on singularitarian interest in accelerating technology. Singularitarians are not people who believe the future will be a cybernetic utopia. Actually, a lot of us are scared to death. One of the reasons why we study the subject and try to draw attention to it is so that people will be aware of the issue. For years, before I discovered Werner Vinge's, or Vinge, if you pronounce it in the French way, seminal work, I thought I was the only one who had thought of the singularity. Back then, I called it threshold technology, and discussed it endlessly in my personal journals. I had never heard of the term intelligence explosion, coined earlier by A.J. Good. It actually frightened me that humanity was rushing headlong into something that, for some reason, no one but me was able to perceive. I can't describe my elation at finding out that I was not alone in my hopes, but even more so my fears. I was delighted to realize that there were people who had ideas as to how we could navigate our way to and through this imponderable obstacle. Are you another person who hates Christmas? Honestly, your description of the future is lacking only in 1 or 2 sentences to place you firmly inside a Charles Dickens novel. What is wrong with looking to the future in a positive light? Are pessimists more likely to create a better world? And my reply, also Feb 29th, 2012, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. And the title of the reply is called The American Muddle Class. Dear Anonymous, I'm glad to hear that there are some American singularitarians who are worried about the future. I wish there were more, and that they would speak out more to counter the overweeningly naive optimism of US organizations such as Kurzweil AI, Humanity Plus, transhumanists, etc. Read my doctor in front of my name, and your, first of all, PhDs who refer to themselves as doctor are universally reviled. I recommend that you drop the affectation, end quote. I'm probably mostly European in my lived-in 7-country mentality: Australia, England, Holland, Belgium, Japan, US, China. I didn't like living in Australia nor America because of the lack of sophistication and the lack of a strong intellectual upper class. Tradition of those two countries. The US is a colony to which Europe's intellectual upper class did not migrate. What would they have done in a wilderness? Work with their hands? With few European upper-class intellectual migrants, by default, the British colonies became English-speaking lower-class cultures with strong pressures to conform to middle-class values. In Europe, where I lived for 30 years, the intellectual upper class have real teeth. En France, les intellectuels sont les dieux. That's English. In France, the intellectuals are gods, and look down on everyone, because they feel superior to everyone, and of course they are. They are the sages of their cultures. They dominate and lead their cultures. They browbeat the middle class, and the middle class is afraid of them, of being intellectually crushed by superior intellect and knowledge. I'm very happy to be a sage and piss on American middle-class mindlessness. For example, 80% religious, 50% believe the earth is less than 10,000 years old, anti-Darwin, still nationalistic, corporate bought-up politicians, ad-infested TV, death penalty, no national health service, lax gun laws, etc. Ad-libbing now. I've changed my tune somewhat on guns in America. I now see, given the Illuminati and the goal of the Jewish banksters to dictate to the world, I see Americans with all their guns as the means to stop that. There are more guns in America than Americans. So if the Jewish elite really try to impose a dictatorial police state on the American population, then they will be butchered. They will be shot dead by ordinary Americans. And that's a good thing. So I've changed my tune somewhat. What I'm doing here is culture bashing, which I consider increasingly to be an important prerequisite for globification, that is, the establishment of globa, a world state, hence no more wars, no arms trade. The US is the world's biggest arms trader. No ignorance, no poverty. Culture bashing, so opposite to American PC values, is needed to shake nationalistic monos, that's monocultured people, out of their complacency, to help form a homogenized global culture. I'm a globist. I see the US as a middle-class colony with all its mindlessness and lack of old-world intellectuality and sophistication. It deserves to be culture bashed. It has way too much PC, an attitude I despise due to its intellectual dishonesty. The hard reality scientists should speak out more in the US by proclaiming such things as blacks, average IQ of 70 in Africa, are dumber than whites, average IQ 100. Whites are dumber than yellows, average IQ 105. That's the Chinese. The genii are males, with their 10% higher IQ variance over females. The Zionist Jews are Palestinian land-robbing colonizers. US politicians are corporate puppets, etc. There's too much middle-class mindlessness in the US. That country's sages should fight sageism, which is anti-intellectualism, and speak out, slapping down the stupidities of the American middle class. Sages of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your brains. When optimism and realism clash, I prefer realism. I'm not a child. I want to know the reality, warts and all. The singularity Pollyannists need to be counterbalanced by the singularity Jeremiahists. Intellectuality demands it, and I'm saying that as a sage, which by definition is someone in the top 1% IQ-wise, has a PhD, has ideas, and writes books about them. Sages are 1 in 1,000 and have a duty to slap down middle-class mindlessness that the US is full of. Phew, got that off my chest. Cheers, Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS, Sage. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com, website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. And then a reply, March 1st, 2012, so the next day, by Giulio Prisco. He has a very big head. Okay, his photos. Go to the flyer, the text, and you'll see his a little photo. See, he has a big head, an egg head. I am European and fully qualified for membership in the intellectual upper class, but I can tell you that many self-styled European intellectuals are complete idiots in love with the sound of their own voice and fully immersed in their self-delusion of importance. In my native language, we have a nice expression on them. So, is he a native language Italian who's picked up good English? His English is not perfect. Anyway, the cock and the rubbish. Imagine a cock standing on a big pile of rubbish and singing. Rather crowing. Anyway, I gave up my intellectual class membership card long ago. And another one from Julio at Hugo Reartlex. I envisage a co-evolution of organic and non-organic intelligence, with humans and machines hybridizing and merging until it would be impossible to tell which is which. So I'm not worried about them exterminating us, because they will be us and we will be them. I hope Artlex will find more interesting things to do than killing old-style humans 1.0, like, for example, moving to space and exploring the stars. Feb 29th, 2012, my reply to Giulio. Dear Giulio, I think you are stating a standard argument of the cyborgists, that is, that if all humans become cyborgs, and later Artlex, there won't be any humans, that is, Terrans or Cosmists, left over to wage an Artlex war. I see the fault with this argument is that the growing presence of cyborgs everywhere will only hasten the alienation and paranoia of the Terrans, and motivate them all the more to first strike against the Cosmist/Cyborgist/Cyborgs/Artlex before it's too late for them, that is, before they become too stupid to be able to fight back effectively. My questionnaires show that this is a widely held view. I see cyborgism not as the solution to the prospect of a giga-death Artlex war, but as part of the problem. I don't deny the likelihood of billions of cyborgs, but their cyborgian divergence, that is, their many types and directions, will cause traditional humanness to get lost, and many Terrans will simply not tolerate that and will go to war to preserve human species dominance. The Pollyannists don't seem to consider this very real possibility, and hence do not merit my respect. The Pollyanist cyborgist view that an Artlex war can be avoided by having everyone become cyborgs I see as wishful thinking, rather like the idea of life after death. Cheers, Hugo de GARIS. And Giulio Prisco replies, Dear Hugo, unfortunately I see the alienation and paranoia of the Terrans, which motivates them all the more to first strike against the Cosmist/Cyborgist/Cyborg/Artlex before it is too late for them, end quote, as a plausible scenario. History has many examples of murderous mass hysteria against minorities that don't harm anyone and only want to be left in peace and do their own thing. I hope sanity will prevail. If not, everyone will be forced to choose a side. If it comes to that, I will certainly side with the Cosmists, because that is the direction of our evolution. An analogy that I use often is, children become adults, and at some moment a child ceases to exist and an older adult takes his place. But this does not mean that the adult has killed the child, it just means that the child has grown up, as children are supposed to do. We, humans 1.0, are children, waiting to become adult. Of course, the transition can be painful, as we all remember. And I reply to his reply. Dear Giulio, privately I'm a cosmist. I think it would be a cosmic tragedy if humanity chooses to freeze the current state of evolution at the, quote, puny human level, when there's a whole universe to explore. But publicly I'm cosmist and Terran and cyborgist, and try to raise the alarm on the species dominance war, Artlex war, that I see coming, and is a likelihood that my questionnaires also seem to confirm. Sometimes I feel that the singularity Pollyannists haven't fully absorbed the enormity of what is at stake in the species dominance debate, namely that this is all in capital letters, the rise of the intellect spells the end of the dominance of the human species. Let that sink in. Most people today do not take it to heart. It's just an intellectual abstraction to them, too far into the future to be taken seriously and to be thought hard about. But it's only a few decades away, probably. So that means that if I'm right about a gigadeath intellect war coming, then most young people reading this will be killed in this war. That's what I'm talking about. From the point of view of the Terrans, the Cosmos/Cyborgists are the very opposite of being harmless, as you suggest. The Terrans see these groups as a profound threat who will have the capacity to wipe out humanness and humanity. When humans are threatened with their very survival, they usually lash out with murderous violence. I see the intellect war as history's most passionate because there's so much at stake this time. Not the survival of a country, for example, when Stalin was fighting Hitler at Stalingrad, but the survival of a species, that is, human beings. This intellect war will be an extermination war to wipe out the Cosmos/Cyborgists/Cyborgs/intellects. I really don't want to see it. I'm glad I'm alive now and will die quietly in my bed, probably. I don't want to witness the gigadeath horrors that my grandson will see and be destroyed by. Shudder. Not so. Cheers, Hugo de GARIS. And a reply to my reply to his reply to my reply. Giulio Prisco. Well, Hugo, I have no doubts that the Terrans will see the cosmos as a profound threat. For the same reason, fear of hatred of diversity, why the moral majority see immigrants, homosexuals and radical liberals as profound threats. I can understand that, but the moral majority and the Terrans will have to give in. Read, the rise of the intellect spells the end of the dominance of the human species. I disagree. This depends on how you define the human species. As I define it, the human species includes our AI and cyborg mind children. So the end of human 1.0 dominance means no more to me than the dominant shift from a specific human culture, like the Roman Empire, to a younger and more dynamic one. Remember my analogy. Children become adults, and at some moment a child ceases to exist, and an adult takes his place. But this does not mean that the adult has killed the child. It just means that the child has grown up, as children are supposed to do. This guy's English is native, I think. Or either that, he maybe migrated to America when he was young. His English sounds perfect. Dear Giulio, I wrote another essay a while back called There Are No Cyborgs. Its link is profhugodegaris.wordpress.com/essays, which made the point that a single grain of sand that has been nanotech to manipulate 1 bit per atom and switching in femtoseconds can outperform the equivalent bit flipping capacity of the human brain by a factor of a quintillion. That's 1,000,000 trillion. So very quickly cyborgs become intellects. The human component is quickly drowned by the intellectual component. I am cynical of organizations such as the transhumanists and the humanity pluses because they don't seem to appreciate the above point. To the transhumanists, I could say, a transhumanist is to an intellect as a transbacterium is to a human. And to the humanity pluses, I could say, humanity won't be augmented, it will be drowned. Cheers, Hugo. Another reply from Giulio. Dear Hugo, if cyborgs become intellects, then I look forward to becoming a cyborg. I doubt this will happen very quickly though, because cyborgization with the first brain implants and AI grafts will probably happen much before the development of artifact class processing substrates. It will be a relatively slow process with the possibility of gradual adaptation. We'll be able to choose what to keep and what to discard, and I'm sure most will choose to keep their basic human empathy and compassion, and so will treat old-style humans kindly. Eventually, the human component may be drowned by more evolved components, but I am not shedding any tears or losing any sleep. My child self was mostly drowned when my adult self emerged, but I still feel like the continuation of that child. We may well lose parts of our current humanness, but is that really a big deal? I wouldn't mind losing the part of our humanness that created Auschwitz, for example. Well, Auschwitz was a labour camp. The idea that millions were gassed there is a myth created by the Jewish elite themselves. And the simple proof of that is thanks to Gorbachev. I'm ad-libbing now. Late 80s, Gorbachev opened up the Russian archives. Researchers went in and found the death certificates of the prisoners who had died during the war at Auschwitz. There weren't millions of them, there were 70,000 of them. 40,000 of them were Jews, and being death certificates, the German doctors wrote down the cause of death, and the two major causes were starvation and typhus. No mention of gassing. There was no gassing. The Holocaust with a capital H really got going in the 70s to make it easier for the Jewish elite to extract so-called guilt money from largely America and Germany to prop up a bankrupting Israel. So it's just yet another example of abuse of the Goy by the hated Jewish elite. That's it. Okay. So, cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channel name Hugo de GARIS.